Hi everybody, this is Keely Dion again, and today I will be presenting endangered language in Southeast Asia, specifically Vietnamese Ruk. Ruk is a language majorly found in Vietnam that is classified as definitely endangered by UNESCO. It is an Austroasiatic language, most likely of the Viet Muong group. As such, it is part of a linguistic union similar to the Sino-Tibetan and Far East languages, categorized by their typological similarity. The language preserves many ancient features of the Viet Muong languages. For example, many of the roots are two-syllable as opposed to the other languages that become monosyllabic. This demonstrates the ancient nature of Ruk because languages normally transition to monosyllabization when there is no longer a need for many new words. Contrastingly, two-syllable roots are easier to apply and create new words. Ruk is categorized by two subsets of morphology or grammar, an old and a new. Modern Ruk grammar focuses on causation and dative cases, using the prefix of causation pa. The old Ruk rarely uses these forms, and also omits more complex grammar such as passive or plural forms. In terms of words, the language is composed of 84% simple words and 16% compounds. Here's a recording of spoken Ruk language. I was unable to find any Ruk for me to speak myself, plus I thought the real thing would be better than me trying to pronounce it with no experience in Asian language.
Rú, rừng rậm, rú phụng, rừng thưa, rú rống, cây, rễ, lẻ, thân cây.
Ruk is spoken by a small population living in the mountainous jungles of central Vietnam. They were first found in 1959 by Vietnamese soldiers during the American-Vietnam War. The group lives as a hunter-gatherer community. As previously mentioned in class, the tribe is one of the few remaining hunter-gatherer populations in Southeast Asia, which majorly dwindled after the development of agriculture. For hunting, they use bows and arrows, use basic agriculture, and move to new lands every year. They even use the duration of field life as a unit of time. For example, instead of saying, "My son is 7 years old," they would say, "My son has 7 fields." Vietnamese Ruk is currently spoken by about 250 people. Not much is known about their average age. However, the population has declined from about 500 people in 1981 to 250 at the turn of the 21st century, due to low living conditions, poor hygiene, and epidemics. Because the Ruk tribe was not discovered until 1959, the group lived in total isolation from the Vietnamese state until the second half of the 20th century. They now live in forest villages in the Ruk Lan Valley, still mostly isolated from the rest of society. They engage in trade with the Vietnamese for clothing, pots, axes, and knives. As Hutterer stated earlier in the course, the need of forest products by Southeast Asian farmers creates an economic niche for hunter-gatherer communities. Ho Tien Nam was the first Ruk person to be admitted to Quang Binh University in Vietnam. He is now the first Ruk teacher and teaches literacy to young tribe members as well. In terms of factors that are endangering the Ruk language, the Vietnamese state declared that the Ruk tribe is outdated and potentially harmful to themselves because of their perceived poverty and isolation. Now, Vietnam is a communist state, and policies are therefore greatly influenced by the communist ideology focused on progress. The state therefore resettled the Ruk tribe into a small village with houses, farming, and access to modern state education. They believe that literacy and learning the state language is the best way to mainstream the new Ruk generation and integrate them into Vietnamese society. Intentionally or not, the uprooting of the Ruk community and the greater access to the national language has endangered Ruk as a language more so than before. Because the state is pushing the cultural integration of the Ruk community into Greater Vietnam, there are some non-state institutions that are working to preserve Ruk as a unique language. Recently, there has been a Vietnamese NGO-led audio digitization of ethnic minority languages, Ruk included. The audio library provides users with the origin of the language, pronunciation, and some folk verses of the ethnic group. This aims to preserve and popularize ethnic languages in Vietnam. It was actually on their website that I found the Ruk audio to share in my presentation. Indigenous groups are leading their own preservation movements as well. The Rook tribe themselves are attempting to preserve their culture by practicing tribe traditions such as witchcraft, Rook music, hunter-gathering, and cave dwelling for extended durations of the year. Now we must consider, is language loss an inevitable byproduct of socioeconomic development in an era of globalization and nation-states? Or is preserving a diverse linguistic heritage a critical part of building a sustainable future? I would argue that it depends on whether Southeast Asian countries hope to holistically preserve their traditions and culture. In the face of globalization and socioeconomic development, countries like Indonesia and Malaysia have seen movements of Puritanism, partly in opposition to the corruption of the state. If the state is prescribing national indoctrination through literacy and education, then inevitably, linguistic and cultural traditions will be lost in the process. Now, in order to preserve cultural diversity in the face of a homogenizing state, civil society and civil institutions must protect and preserve traditions in place of state policy, just like the Vietnamese NGOs and indigenous tribes. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing the rest of your presentations.